I had a meeting with my daughter today, but it didn't go well, and I don't think she left happy. She was very gracious and enthusiastic. But too much time had passed, and the hurt was too deep for me to return her kindness without hesitation. If she, such a nice person, why haven't I ever spoken to her? All because of something her mother did. I told Megan's mother at her funeral 5 years ago that it was one of the most emotional days of my life. I told my son Stuart the same thing while pointing to his face and saying, looking at the shocked onlookers, I made it clear that my words applied to them as well. My family and friends were taken aback by my outburst, and I'll never forget the looks on people's faces. The pain of that moment will stay with me forever, as well as the pain of our broken family, the pain of their lost mothers. I left everything that day with my youngest daughter, Faye, our 25th year. I found a huge trail on our anniversary. It was a sunny June day, and all our friends and family came. My father was in a wheelchair, sitting at the main table with Connie's parents. We were congratulated by everyone from friends to neighbors. We can imagine that even the mayor came with a special gift from him and the town council, a plaque declaring that. On June 14th, Connie and Mark had a great day at the circus in the big tent with over 200 circus performers. People laughed, ate, drank, and danced late into the night as we renewed our vows, and tears were shed by all, especially Connie. Although our children were not at the altar and our family was not there, I did not see anyone else shedding a tear. Holding hands in the front row, even our golden retriever wasn't at the parson's feet, and all I could see was Connie, our oldest daughter, Megan, just got back from her honeymoon a week ago. A month after we were married, Stuart finished his second year of college, and our youngest child, daughter Faye, finished her first year of school, and it's good to have everyone home. But I miss the hustle and bustle of having kids around. A few days later, after our anniversary party, I moved all the chairs, tables, and other stuff. When I accidentally backed my truck into a new Lexus in the parking lot, I drove it back to the rental car office, turned too sharply, and hit the headlights of the Lexus. Greg, who grew up with Stuart and played on many of his sports teams, has grown taller than me now, and his uniforms give the impression of. I watched him grow up, and I'm as proud of him as I am of myself. After sorting through the paperwork, we chatted and gossiped for a while, and finally he said something like, my boys, my boys. I thought, well, Mr. Jenkins. Greg shook my hand and said, I have to get back to the station. It was nice to meet you. I'm sorry I missed your anniversary party. My parents said it was great, and it was nice to meet him. I held the boy's hand once again, and I remembered trying to steal second base in Little League BU. He always got caught back. But now he's a friend I'm proud of. He added with a sly grin, I'm going to have to watch out for those stop signs from now on. Next time I look, they won't be so lenient. Confused Greg seemed embarrassed. I didn't mean to say that. I could tell he was feeling uncomfortable, so I tried to ease his embarrassment. Don't worry, Greg. Connie doesn't always tell me when she gets a ticket. She says I don't know. She thinks I'm going to get mad and take away her driving privileges. But I won't, but I let her think so to stay in the. Why did you give her a ticket? I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. I didn't want to cause trouble. I laughed even harder as I told him that no one was in trouble and that it was just a minor issue. I teased him in a friendly way and asked him to tell me what was going on. 31st, I believe your wife drove her car out of the LDA's parking lot onto Route 40 without stopping at the stop sign. She didn't hit anyone or disturb traffic, but she was going so fast that I had to stop her and remind her to slow down. I should have ticketed her for not stopping, but since no damage was done, I just gave her a warning and let her go. Yes, Greg, you did the right thing. I'll talk to her and tell her to be more careful and maybe teach her a lesson. Thanks for letting me know. It was nice to see you again after unloading the chair. I sat in my truck and thought back to my conversation with Greg 2 weeks ago, on the 30th, when I went to my father's house. The weekend 2 weeks after Megan's wedding. He was at home helping with work he couldn't do himself. On Saturday, I spent the day with my father looking at nursing homes to see if he would consider downsizing. He wasn't too interested in the idea, and I knew he wouldn't be, but I had to try. I didn't get home until about 9 p.m. Monday night. She said she spent a quiet day at home, reading her book. I thought Greg must have misremembered because Connie wouldn't lie to me, so I took it as a matter of. A month after the big anniversary party, my sister called to say she'd found Dad lying in the. While she was shopping, he fell on the kitchen floor and was unable to get back into his wheelchair. He said he was not injured. I immediately made plans to stay with him that Saturday and tried to convince him to let him move to a smaller place where he can get more help, and maybe this time he'll be scared enough to listen. But since Stuart and Faye were home for the summer, I asked them, or more accurately, I convinced them to come along. I played the guilt card. You haven't seen your grandfather in a long time, and he won't be around forever. And they all agreed. Stuart mentions a girl he likes in his philosophy book. F says she wants to focus on college and doesn't want to worry about having a boyfriend anymore. And she says she has. After school, we had plenty of time to have a nice conversation about their future, and I told them that. He's more livable. Why than I've ever seen him. After a while, the children hugged him and sat down to listen to his stories of the old days. At noon, he fell asleep in his chair, so we all split up to let him rest. Grandpa, I'll be back soon. I want to go find something to cut down that old dead tree in the yard before it falls. I told Stuart that Faye stayed in the living room and watched TV while I babysat Grandpa. I was going to drive home to pick up the chainsaw, rope, and everything I needed to cut down the tree. I took the interstate exit on a Highway 40, and as I came to the bottom of the hill, I saw the entrance to the lodge right at the bottom of the hill. Without thinking, I turned into the motel parking lot. Noticing that Connie ignored the stop sign at the bottom of the hill, it's easy to see why someone would ignore it, including me. I was about to leave the parking lot when I saw something that caught my eye. Noticing a car that wasn't supposed to be there, Connie's car, I stopped to let. I'm sure I'm reading this right. There are a lot of silver Toyota Camrys around here, but only one has a license plate that says, "Come on, I'm getting out of the car." I looked inside, and everything seemed normal, and the door was locked. I thought I'd go see if she knew where her car was. But when I called her cell phone, she answered, "Hi. Honey, what's up?" I was helping my dad with some groceries and thought I'd call and see if I could help. "You're not answering your phone. I'm calling your cell." "Where are you?" "I'm at the mall. I'm done eating." She lied to me. At least that's what I thought. Don't spend the kids' college money. "What time are you coming home?" "I'll be back around 6 o'clock. Want me to make dinner?" She asked. "No, I'm not feeling too well. I might stay at Dad's tonight and drop the kids off at home. I'll let you know." "Well, call me when you've made up your mind. I gotta go." "Have fun and be careful when you go." I waited at a loss for words when I suddenly heard a muffled scream from the direction of the motel. I sat on the hood of Connie's Camry sedan and watched the area. After a while, a police car pulled up and Greg stepped out. "Jenkins, was that you on the phone? I'd better go and talk to the manager." "Sure." "Greg, when you go in, could you go and see if Mrs. Jenkins is there and who's there?" "She's with me." "I'll wait here." "I'm fine." "Wait." "Oh no, I'm sorry, Mr. Jenkins." "I'll find out." He said he was really sorry, looked sick, and went back to his room. I waited a long time, but nothing happened, and it felt like a long time. As the ambulance approached and pulled up to the motel entrance, I could hear the ambulance sirens getting louder and the paramedics arriving. After Greg drove off, he came toward me with a serious look on his face. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jenkins, but your wife was taken to the hospital in an accident. In the ambulance at the county hospital, she tried to ram the last glass sliding door, but it didn't budge. Her eye was cut, she was in shock, and the man she was with left when the ambulance came. I can't disclose his statement right now, but you can come down to the station tomorrow and file a liberty petition. I'm really sorry. You and Ms. Jenkins are like family to me." I shook my hand, but I couldn't respond. I was too upset to drive back to my dad's house. I stood in the driveway and realized something was wrong and ran outside to ask me what happened. I never cried in front of my child until I finally broke down in front of her. When Stuart joined us via Sabs, the pain made F start crying too. I told them that their mother was in the hospital and that they should go help her. I gave Stuart the car keys and told them I wasn't going with them. I said I was leaving. That night, they looked at me with concern, but left. When I was growing up, whenever I faced a challenge, he would say to act like a. I half expected to hear the same advice this time, so I kept quiet, but I realized that. I was surprised when he told me a story about your mom and me. "After you were born, I had trouble at work. Mother wanted an expensive red dress, but I couldn't afford to buy it for her, so I stole a tool and sold it. I got caught and had to pay for what I took, but I still got fired and had to turn it in. I reported it to the police and got a year's probation, which was the easiest part, and your mother is angrier at me than ever. I have probably disappointed her more than ever in her life, and it has deeply damaged our marriage. Then one day she came home and told me that she might have gotten me a job. She suggested I go to her workplace the next morning for an interview. Then she hugged me and looked me in the eye. She said she forgave me for nearly destroying our marriage, that she'd put aside her pride and welcomed me back. I loved her deeply from that day until she left this world. Yes, she was hurt for a while, but she's a better person than I am, and we took a step forward. Not sure what's going on, but it looks like you're going through something similar to me. Maybe you need to forgive. Maybe you need to forgive people like your mother did, but maybe what happened can't forgive you. I'm sure you'll make the right decision. I don't say this often, but I'm so proud of the person you've become, and I love you so much. The phone rang in the evening, but I didn't answer it. I should have, but I heard them all whispering the same thing in my ear. Because I couldn't sleep, I spent the weekend with my dad and talked to Megan and Stuart on the phone. When they asked about Connie, I wasn't ready for her to see or hear the state of my Monday morning. I called the company and explained that I had a family emergency and needed to take a few days off. I think my kids know more than I do, but one thing I know for sure is that I can't afford to know more of her familiar greetings. Her voice interrupted my thoughts and stirred a whirlwind of emotions. Her nose was bandaged to hold the broken bones together, and a large piece of gauze covered one eye, concealing her other eye was surrounded by dark black and orange bruises and looked a mess, just like Faye had said. She was once so beautiful, and now she's been so badly hurt. I came to apologize. I know, apologizing isn't enough, but it's all I can do. Megan drove me here because I'm not back to being able to drive yet. I need to see you, talk to you, make you realize what I've done to you, what I've done to us. It's my fault, not yours. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't. I hurt you, and I feel the same pain, if not more, because I caused it, and the pain I feel is I may have destroyed something more important to me than life itself. Mark, I'd like to explain. If I hear more, it could ruin me. Please don't say anything. Mark, if you understand what happened, maybe you can forgive me. I don't want to lose you. I love you, and you need to understand why I'm weak and why I did what I did. I interrupted her when I told you I didn't want to hear anything from you. But Mark, you have to listen to me. It's the only way we can get through this and be a family again. Please, Mark, listen to me. I didn't just walk away. Megan pleaded as she followed me into the kitchen. She needs you to listen to me. I turned and looked at my elders. My daughter's words set me on a path that ultimately led to my own downfall. Megan, if you think that, you're more naive than she is. And if she needs to clear her conscience, she'll. It could be written in a letter and sent to me. I can't sit there and listen to her make excuses as to why she threw away 25. I can't go near her now. I can't forgive her. I got in my car and drove away. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know where I was going, and I didn't know if I would ever come back. I didn't cry much on the drive. Most of my tears had already been shed in my dad's yard. I just needed to escape and clear my head. When I got back to my dad's house the next day, Faye was smiling and hugging me. It means a lot to me. And it reminds me that despite all the trials and tribulations, happiness still exists. One day I could find happiness again, but what is not clear is whether my decision will bring a smile. Dad and Faye said I was glad to see them at dinner, and I told them I had decided to move in with Dad for a while, and I told them I'd had enough of Dad's cooking. When I realized he needed more than just bacon and eggs, I asked Faye if he could pack some for me. I said I couldn't go back while Mom was there, and I needed some work and supplies. I told her she could let everyone know I'd be back. I just wanted to say that my mom and I are temporarily separated. Sure, Dad, I'll go back tonight and get what you need. Give me a list. Should I tell Mom anything? Let her know I'll be staying here. She shouldn't have called me. But I'm worried about the things he didn't tell me, the things he didn't mention about Connie, or the recent events that we even did. When Faye returned with our things, I was surprised to see her. I'll take the guest room, she said firmly. She looked determined as she helped us unload our bags that night. With a frustrated look on her face, Faye asked, "Do you believe what my sister said? You're acting like a child. You should go home and talk to your mother and Stuart, and he's just as bad as he is." Basically, he says that everyone cheats on their loved ones at some point in their lives, and that it's no big deal, and he even suggests that you forgive them. Can you believe those two idiots at Faye Daddy? You didn't do anything wrong. And it seems like everyone thinks you're the bad guy in Grandpa's family. And from my perspective, It's mom who did it wrong. I don't think she deserves to be forgiven. That's why I'm here. It looks like those three think you're the one. I couldn't stand it, so I packed up my stuff and put it in the car, and I knew that once she made up her mind, there was no changing it, so I sat next to her. Over the next few months, I try to keep everything as normal as possible. She goes to work every day, helps with the housework, and teaches Faye to make a delicious vegetable lasagna every now and then. When I get a call from Megan or Stuart asking when I'm coming back, I can imagine Connie waiting behind them. I told them I was staying with Dad and didn't want to hear anything about Connie or talk to her. One day, Stuart appeared at the door and he said he had something important to tell me, and we went outside and sat down and made him say, "Dad, you need to come home, it's time to. It's been 2 months. Mom is worse than ever. I'm going back to school soon, and I can't leave Megan alone to take care of her. Mom, we worry about what Mom will do when we're all gone," and she cries. She sleeps very little, barely eats, and has lost a lot of weight. Friends have come to visit her, and they're just as worried as we are that she doesn't do anything but sit at home and stare. We tried taking her out to dinner or shopping, but she started crying again. "Dad, I think you've punished her enough. You need to get over your resentment and come home. She's sorry you're hurt, and she's hurt too." I sat there and looked at my son, the same boy I had taught baseball and football to, the same boy I had helped him earn his Eagle Scout badge, but now he is not the same son I was once proud of his accomplishments and choices. Values have changed, and he thinks what his mother does is acceptable, and if it's okay for her, it's setting a bad example. I've always taught my kids that commitments are important and should be taken seriously. I've tried to instill good moral values in them by word and deed, and now I think Stuart is completely off the mark. Stuart, you're a man now, so I can be clear with you. Get out of my house. If you support what your mother is doing, then you have changed, not. Okay, okay. Go home and take care of your mom. I'll be here until I make a decision. Now go. Before I threw you out, I got up and went inside. A few minutes later, I heard his car pull away and Faye went back to his room. At the end of August, I hadn't heard from Megan or Stuart, and I assumed that Stuart had gone back to school and that Megan. Connie and her new husband were so busy they didn't call me. It was just Dad and me. Connie's letter, which I started to read, but couldn't get through, I told Megan that if Connie wanted to clear her conscience, she should have written it all down and sent it to me. And now that I have the letter, I can't bear to read it. The hurt hadn't passed, and instead of thinking about it, I did my best to move on with my life. She says she has talked to Megan and Stuart, and they are doing the same for their kids. Mama Faye is planning to visit me on my birthday at the end of October, and hopefully by then I'll have Mayday. Regarding our future, I told her I was trying to stay positive and joked that I was going to try some real lasagna. I hadn't laughed in months, but when we got back from dinner, I helped my dad settle into his bed. I gave her a beer, and we sat down and talked. "Dad, have you decided?" I finally read her letter, but I'm not sure I believe everything she wrote, which could be true. But it seems so unbelievable that because it happened so long ago, I doubt we can reconcile, and I need to sit down with the. If I can't trust her, divorce might be the way to go. I'm ready to move on. I'll call her tomorrow. Father's phone call interrupted me, and even though I hadn't finished, I put her on the phone. "It's Megan." She said I'd go out and get it. She was gone a couple minutes and came back. Her eyes went wide, and she looked around before collapsing into my arms. I hugged her and she cried on my shoulder, sobbing uncontrollably, and after a few minutes she drew back and wiped the tears from her eyes. Megan found her lying in the bathtub tonight, and she seemed to have taken all her sleeping pills. I didn't say much about it. The big question was my role in Connie taking those sleeping pills. But my refusal made her mood worse. I loved her dearly, and her betrayal hurt me just as much. Maybe she understood my pain, but she couldn't bear it now. I'll never know for sure. All I know is that her cheating behavior destroyed our marriage, and my behavior may have pushed her over the edge. We both made mistakes. May God help us. Forgive us both. Tomorrow is Connie's funeral, and it will be the last goodbye I'll ever say to anyone I ever. In order to keep myself strong for our friends and family, I had to say goodbye without breaking down as I turned the front door. The door slammed shut, and Megan came through the back door. "Megan, are you okay?" She replied, "No, not really." We sat quietly and collected our thoughts, listening to the whispers of the leaves in the garden. Night when Megan looked at me, and said you don't know. If you go home and forgive her, she made a mistake, and I'm sure you will too. She forgave you because she couldn't go on without you, and your pride ruined her, else sat there looking at my own daughter dumbfounded, blaming me for my wife's death. No matter how many times I said it or thought about it, I kept telling myself that I hadn't done any of it. I didn't have an affair. I didn't cheat on my friends and family for 6 months. I didn't take sleeping pills. To assuage my guilt, Dad, tomorrow's going to be tough. Everyone's going to be here afterward. There will be a lot of people at the funeral, and you don't have to do anything, not even be here, as long as you. I don't want to go to Stewart, and Mom's friends are helping with everything, so don't worry about Megan. I don't think she'll go. Wanted me to come to the party after the funeral. Maybe she was too stressed and emotional. I don't understand one thing. I was sure I didn't want to argue with my daughter on the eve of her mother's funeral, so I got up and walked into the house. I gathered up all the bedding, put it in the laundry basket, and got dressed. I got my suit and tie from downstairs, and the boys were already dressed and waiting for me in the living room, my boss. Faye came over with a tired look on her face and straightened my tie like her mother had done countless times before I kissed her. Faye kept holding my hand without saying a word. She didn't say a word to anyone, not even to me, just sat silently with her head down. As we entered the funeral home, there were many friends and neighbors gathered in the lobby. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but as I passed our friends I noticed something different in the expressions of my neighbors, and instead of the sympathy I expected, many of them exuded a look of disdain. When I nodded to a few people, they quickly turned away to talk to others. He expressed his condolences, but everyone around him expressed the same hostility. For me, the kids get sympathetic looks from those who have already been through this pain. I don't have a lot of experience with funerals, and the only one I was deeply involved in was my mother's funeral. Faye walked with me to the casket, and we knelt together and said our last words. The soundtrack to the farewell was a soft organ, but I could still hear the murmur of the crowd behind me. Silent prayers, I caught snatches of their whispers. Idiotic obstinacy, he abandoned her, he created this hypocrite. He destroyed her, and they held my hand tightly, sharing the pain of the harsh words we heard. Connie's favorite hymns, instead of the usual funeral music, the usual funeral music played, but Connie's friends didn't recognize me or Faye after talking to Megan and Faye. Several of Stewart's friends spoke, and Megan concluded with a call for mercy and forgiveness, comparing it to the behavior of Jesus. The tombstone was cold and empty as we listened to the preacher at the tombstone. At the funeral, each of us laid a red rose on Connie's casket, me first, then Faye, then Megan, Stewart's dad's friend. I pushed him in his wheelchair past the casket, and then left in excitement. They were angry that they were dead to me for spreading lies and portraying me in a negative light. Everyone then left, and Faye instructed the limo driver to leave quickly, leaving Megan and Stewart on the side of the road. Then only a few people came to the party, including my boss and his wife, and two neighbors, Megan and Stewart. Faye later said that a lot of people think I did something to Connie that caused her death. She died, so now they think I'm responsible for Faye going back to school, which makes me feel even more alone. Her visit over the holidays was the highlight of my lonely days, and while Megan was busy taking care of her new family, Stewart was. During his break, I was either at college or elsewhere, and I focused on work to cope with my grief. Often I wake up in the night, still haunted by memories of my late wife Connie and her affair with Jay Bronsky. As time passed and Megan's injuries eased a bit, she named herself kids Connie and Chance, but I've never met them. Stewart married a college sweetheart, but ended up getting divorced. He followed in his mother's footsteps and moved to California through deception. I lost contact with him after the funeral. Faye keeps me up to date on their lives, and they are still my kids, even though I have changed jobs and my supervisor is a... I was given a lot of support and space when I needed it, as well as being pushed to improve so that I could be promoted to senior staff. While working as a manager in Florida, I moved to Orlando, sold my old house, started a new life, and made sure my dogs adjusted to their new surroundings. I lost most of my friends in Maryland, but my friends are fine. I still have a few people I'm in touch with, but they don't invite me out as often a year after my father died. Connie, it's just me and Faye now. Faye graduated at the top of his class with A. She has a good job in Florida and now lives with me, and I'm in no hurry for her to move out. I had lost almost everything except Faye, and I felt like a lonely old man with only my dog for company. I used to write only business reports, but recently I've started writing short stories. I started writing short stories again, and even sold a couple in one weekend. What started out as an idea for a story turned into a manuscript about a difficult chapter in my life. Reliving those painful memories, but writing this post was therapeutic for me. I also took a creative writing class in order to improve my writing. At the local community college, most of my classmates were much younger and less experienced than I was, but I found that two of the older ones, Morris and Alicia, are kindred spirits. Alicia, a widow and mother of 5, moved to Florida to start a new life and explore new passions through the more Alicia and I talked, the more I realized we had in common. I haven't dated in almost 30 years, so I pay close attention to their conversations. One day she asked about my past and why I did what I did. I was alone in a writing class at a community college in Central Florida, and I gave her a condensed version of my story. I hoped to steer the conversation back to her, but she kept asking questions until I finally invited her to my restaurant for dinner. The house next Saturday. If you want to know me better, you must come over. I said I'd be glad of her smile. Dinner was wonderful, and we went out on the oval terrace. Enjoying the evening breeze under the palm trees on the patio, not many men can make vegetable lasagna, let alone do it so well. What other surprises do you have in store? I think I know almost everything about you. I manage distribution centers for industrial companies on the East End. My daughter Faye lives with me, and my wife passed away. A little over 5 years ago, I had 2 other children, and you've already met my golden retriever, B, who is basically the all about me. I'm boring. Nothing too exciting, really. You promised you'd tell me your story if I come to dinner, Alicia joked. So spill the beans and I'll wait. I didn't say anything, but got up and went inside. I came back with boxes containing novels I'd been writing for years, and even sold a couple of short stories. I have a lot of stories on my computer, some of them based on my life, and some of them straight up. Before taking a creative writing class, I wrote a story about me and my family based on my imagination. I don't know what to do with the sad story of my family and I. I'm going to write about it and see what happens. Writing this article helped me overcome the pain after my wife passed away, and my family I never showed to anyone but my friends. I would like to hear your opinion. I think it might just be a windshield on a windy day, but I would really value your opinion. I'd love to read your book. What is it? I call it Fair Friend. Wow, it's heavy, she said, taking the book from me. There are 987 pages in total. I want you to read it. Tell me what you think. Even if it's harsh, be honest. I'd love to hear someone else's opinion. I don't need to. Wanted to show it to my daughter because it would bring back too many painful memories and I didn't want to hurt her. I forgot to mention that I'm a very blunt person. I'm starting the book tomorrow, and we discussed writing classes and Florida nightlife. We have a lot in common, including the fact that we both love movies. She gave me a kiss on the cheek as we walked her to her car. After dinner, Alicia didn't show up for our next class, and I haven't heard from her since we had dinner. I thought about calling her, but I didn't want her to think I was crazy and that she should avoid me. 2 weeks later, she called me while I was out and left a message on my answering machine. Hi, Mark, it's Alicia. I would like to invite you to my house for dinner Friday night. My son is visiting me and staying at my home.se for a few days. I'd like you to meet him, and I might surprise you when you come, so please bring a bottle or 2 of wine. We enjoyed a delicious white wine that day and came over at 7 p.m. Give me a call Friday night and let me know what I'm wearing. I brought 2 balsa resale cabinet bottles that I bought at the 2012 shootouts. I read in a local Orlando magazine that this was one of the best white wines of the year, so I decided to believe it. I hope it goes well with Alicia's dishes. She greeted me warmly while showing me around her house. Against the candlelight and the glasses of wine, a man stepped out from between 2 orange trees and into the light at the table. Mark, this is my son, Barry, and this is Mark Jenkins. It's nice to meet you, Barry said as he shook my hand, to which I replied, I'm nothing exciting, Mark. I'm the one who invited you. As soon as the wine cools, we'll eat, but first I want to talk about and share what I think is exciting. The news may surprise you, but I hope it's a good surprise. I'm curious, but I'm also feeling very nervous because I know you probably don't know something about my son coming here to see you tonight. If I had asked you beforehand, you would have agreed, but I did it anyway, and it's too late to change it now, so if you're going to be mad at me. I read your book in only 2 days, and it made me happy. I'm halfway through and I love it. This is the most inspiring. I was really moved by your book, and I cried at the end of the chapter where you move into your home. Father, after learning about your wife, I cried again when I read the part about your children. I sent this book to my son, and he read it. He doesn't usually read books by unknown authors. He was happy to help even though I didn't ask for it. And he loves the book and wants to help you edit it so we can publish it. No? I don't know what to say or what to do. I was stupid, but there was nothing I could do about it. And when I looked at Barry, he smiled and took his. Mother Leaves Mr. Jenkins is the best debut novel I've ever read. At Apprentice Publishing House in New York, we are delighted to tell you that we are going to publish your book. We'll go into more detail about this book later. But for now, congratulations are in order for what is an outstanding book that we think will. I was so shocked and overwhelmed, but Alicia just smiled and gave me a. We kissed on the forehead and then went to get dinner ready. As Barry went through the steps of publishing promotions and royalties, etc., I got emotional at times, and I realized that as soon as Barry went to bed, my head was buzzing with all the information Alicia had told me. It's nice to sip wine in the fresh night air and fantasize about being a celebrity like Stephen King or J.K. Rowling. But I knew it was just a dream, and at midnight, I decided to go home. Alicia walked me to my car and gave me a big kiss, which reminded me that I still have a lot of life left to feel. I've been like this since Connie, and it's bittersweet, but the excitement of the drive home reinvigorates me. Over the next 3 months, I worked with an editor at Apprentice Press to touch up my manuscript. The first thing I did was move my drafts from MS Word to more files. When we finalized the manuscript, I received the printed galley manuscript overnight. Throughout the weekend, I've been carefully polishing every detail and finding small improvements as requested by my editor. I continued to work at Folks Industries during the day and write novels at night, and Faye has been very supportive. She took care of me like a mother, made sure I stayed healthy, and informed me that Alicia would be coming to visit me on the weekends to keep me healthy. My book comes out on May 1st, and my contract calls for me to do a series of book signings all over the country, including one in my hometown of Irrit City, Maryland, a stop that made me so nervous I took 3 weeks off from work. As a writer, touring sounds glamorous, but it's exhausting. On trains to different cities, I stayed in hotels and held endless book signings to discuss the impact of my work with fans. As much as I love meeting people, the traveling wears me out. I played the shy fan, she played the glamorous writer, and she insisted that I be her fan. The last stop was in the city of Eilat, which I asked to be the end of the trip, and luckily they did. I was familiar with this bookstore, which was only a few miles from where I grew up. 0:00 p.m. I'm off now. When I arrived, there was already a crowd, including familiar faces, like my ex-boss and his wife. Their arrival lifted my spirits, and I almost forgot about the long lines. After signing autographs behind them and chatting briefly, everyone else was smiling, even when we were filming the 30 minutes later. An old friend who had traveled a long way from Connie's house sent me photos that were much more pleasant than I had anticipated. I signed his autograph and shook his hand warmly. He didn't understand until he read my book, and then he left. I felt both grateful and uneasy when Leno Bronsky approached me. He looked uncomfortable. She took responsibility for our past problems and told me she was divorced from John, who had caused me so much pain. He also admitted to spreading rumors that I sought revenge, which caused John to move out of the country. But I ended up signing her book with a message of peace and gratitude for her behavior. We hugged for a while, and she left. After the event was officially over and people were still lining up, I noticed Megan standing by the shelves watching. She hadn't come. By the time I finished the next book, she was gone, and at the end of the line was Faye, and we hugged and talked. She drove me back to the hotel, and on the way we talked about Alicia, and she said she liked her, and I told her I loved her, and she said I loved her. A police car pulled up with its lights flashing, and Sheriff Greg stepped out and approached me. We talked like old friends. I hadn't seen him in a while. How meeting him changed my life. Greg had to take a phone call, and when he came back, Faye and I went to dinner. The next surprise was seeing Megan on my doorstep. Alicia and I were talking about how well my book is selling and that it's number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list. Seeing my daughter makes everything else go away. Hi, Dad. How are you doing? Hello, Megan. I'm fine. What brings you here? You're Megan. In such a big circle, doesn't it? I felt Alicia's hand on my shoulder and turned to see her beside me. Do you want to introduce me to Mark? Alicia said in an authoritative tone. This is my daughter. Alicia walked up and gave her a. I've heard a lot about you. They sat down in the living room and talked animatedly for an hour, leaving me alone to clean up. He glanced around the living room several times, noticing them talking and laughing together. While admiring photos of Megan's children, she shouted, "Come join us, honey." Realizing that this was more of an order than a request, I walked over to her and sat down. Megan looked at our intertwined hands with a look of embarrassment on her face. Silence spread between us, and since neither of you were going to say anything, Alicia said firmly, "Mark, I invite you. Megan is here because she has something to say to you, and I knew you wouldn't invite her, so I did." My eyes darted between Megan and Alicia, and I was cornered. I didn't want to start another conflict, so I settled Dad in. I'm also here to apologize for being wrong about a lot of things, especially about you. And I used to. I'm sure everything that happened between Stuart's mom and me was entirely your fault, and I only saw part of it at the time, until I read the. After reading your book, I feel silly for understanding things from your perspective. The pain you went through made me realize that even though I'm a grown man with a family of my own, I'm still. I've always thought of my mom as a saint, even after all the horrible things she did to you. But now I see that it's a shield to protect your feelings, Mom. I thought that if I could be strong enough to forgive her, I thought everything was going to be okay. But what I don't understand is that you can be strong enough to leave a person. You loved her for over 25 years, and you protected us from her mistakes. Megan started crying, and I felt guilty. Alicia. I looked at me, waiting for my answer, and I decided to think about it while I delayed my answer. What about Stuart? Megan asked him how he felt about me. Did he know you were coming here? Stuart's not doing so well. Mom's acting up. After Lori finds out he's cheating on her, he moves to California and lives a wild life. He jumped from one girlfriend to another, and I heard he even had a falling out with a married woman's husband. Stuart still thinks cheating is no big deal. He doesn't know I am here, and I don't care. His thoughts Megan's outburst didn't leave me much time to decide what to do next, and I decided to postpone it. Megan, what's your plan? Are you going to stay in town? Do you have a place to stay? Going to see your new apartment, so I'll be there for a couple days before I go home. Everything you've said today, to let you know what I've decided is the best I can offer right now, Dad. Honestly, I'm going with Faye and Alicia. It's great to see you guys. I hope we can get together again soon. Take care of Dad for me. Megan left so suddenly. I had a lot to think about when I arrived, but this time I had Alicia by my side to help me avoid making light of the situation. At the end of our Caribbean cruise, the apprentice rewarded us with a book that topped the New York Times bestseller list. Alicia and I flew to Maryland, a very special trip, and I got to meet my two grandchildren, ages 2 and 4. Taking Alicia on a tour of my hometown. Alicia is a grandmother now, and she's helped me through some tricky times. When I announced our engagement at a family dinner with Megan, we had already made a decision about a planned cruise. During the wedding, we will visit Alicia's children to share the news with them. I appreciate how life evolves as we go from dreams of our youth to a reality filled with love and second chances. After 25 years with Connie, I am now looking forward to another wonderful chapter with Alicia. Another book,